Well, hello. I trust that everyone is going to be on the webinar is here. And if you are able to get to your chat room, if you just let me know where you may be watching from so I can see if I'm connecting with folks, just tell me where you're from and I'll be able to be aware that we're connecting with each other at this time. So just kind of go to the chat room. Let me know where you are, and we're going to start in just a couple of minutes. Well, welcome to the Have More Than Enough webinar, and have enough, more than enough in every area of your life. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you today. And if you could just, like I said, let me know where you may be watching from. I'll be able to be aware that we are able to connect with the folks that are part of this webinar. I see you have someone here from Hamburg, Germany, a Robert, and says you can see and hear me very clearly. And I think we have a Patricia from Ocala, Tom Kernan from Miami Beach, and a few others are coming on as well. I am so grateful that you are here with me. And if you have any questions to come along the way throughout this webinar, feel free to send me a question. If I can't answer them during the course of the webinar, I'll be more than happy to get back with you at some point. So let's go ahead and begin. So this webinar is entitled Have More Than Enough in Every Area of Your Life. And this webinar is for you if you want to activate what I call the abundance principle that we all have. So I want to make sure that you are in the right place, because you're here for this webinar if you really want to free up any kind of belief that anything outside of you or outer conditioning is what determines what your life will be. And you want to be empowered to achieve your dreams that are within you and to generate what I call genuine abundance, not just superficial abundance, but genuine abundance in every area of your life. And that's not only materially, but physically, because health and well-being is so important to us, but spiritually and as well as in all of our relationships. So this is our agenda for today. We want to identify what this abundance principle is. And we're going to answer this very important question. What is the abundance principle? And how is it that we can activate this abundance principle in our own life? And the second part of our agenda is that we're going to break through what I call the common blind spots that sometimes block our good, because we're not even aware of them sometimes. Sometimes we're driving a car, we realize it's a blind spot. And the third one, we want to master what I call the 7 keys that help us really fulfill and bring forth this abundance that's in and as our life. Right, I had to mute a few folks because there were some sounds coming in. I think I may have taken care of that. All right, we should be good now. Like I said, my name is James Trapp, and I am the president of Star Human Capital. And I'm also the senior minister of worship at Spiritual Life Center here in Sacramento, California, where I'm currently based. And I was the former CEO of an organization called Unity Worldwide Ministries. But my particular mission is to inspire and instruct others to achieve their goals and to really create and co-create their best life right here and now. And what I'm seeking to do is offer what I consider the 21st century techniques to anyone that can reduce their stress, increase their productivity, grow their organizations, and to also help individuals transform their lives using universal spiritual principles. You know, I've been doing this for quite some time. I would say probably since the mid-'80s. And before that, my previous life, I was an attorney. And I did defense work in Miami, Florida. And I thought at that point that I had really arrived in my life. And I had gotten a great deal materially up until that point in my life. But what I came to understand that when you get things outside of your life experience that you believe are going to give you success, what often follows that is dissatisfaction. And so everything that I had achieved in my life, I began to lose. And I happened to stumble across these principles that I'm going to share with you today, some of which I'll share with you today. And they really changed my life forever. And so ever since that time, I've been seeking to share these teachings, the things I've learned over my lifetime, whether it's in speaking, whether it's in workshops, whether it's in seminars, whether it's in the writings that I do, because it's my goal to have as many people as possible really understand how they can apply these principles in their own life. Over the years, I've worked with a number of people that have had an opportunity to see how they can apply these principles in their own life. One of them is Tom Zender, a very successful business executive, and he's now a best-selling author on spirituality in the workplace. And he noted that I had helped bring a lifetime of personal and organizational experiences to help people awaken and harvest the emergent possibilities that are waiting to be expressed, whether in your personal life or in your organization. Dr. Nicole Henry DaCosta, a medical doctor, has indicated that I'm able to provide some practical avenues in which to achieve peace, abundance, as well as prosperity. And she's used a number of the tools that I've learned and passed on to others. And she's been able to implement those in her life to make some positive change, even though she's very, very successful in her own right. And Kasia Halanda, who's an entrepreneur that I've known for a number of years, has indicated she's taken a number of my programs. I always see her. And she says there's never been a single time that I not go home with something new and aha. And I'm reminded that all things are possible. And she says I take full advantage of the support material that's offered, and especially love the great notes I come home with from the programs. So I think the first question we want to ask is, what is abundance? So that question, I think, needs to be answered before we can determine how we can bring it into our life. And abundance, for the purpose of this webinar, is really having more than enough. Having more than enough in every area of life. Not just money, but in time and how we connect with people, in our creativity, in our wholeness. Regardless of what the circumstances that we may be going through, or whatever we're facing in our life, we have the ability to generate abundance. Even if our world is going through some craziness, we have the opportunity to realize this abundance in our world, because we realize that what's outside of us is not our source. It's not about getting anything. The fact of the matter is we already have everything that we need. And we'll get to what that means in a little bit, and how we can apply that and unleash that natural abundance capacity that we have. But it's really the realization that our circumstances do not have the power to determine what our life experience is going to be. Like I said, money is a good thing. But understand that money is nothing more than a symbol. So abundance is not limited just to the material. Because we may know that there are people with a lot of money, but they have poverty in their relationships, and they have poverty in the creative fulfillment of their life. They have poverty in not being able to live their purpose. And if we make the object of our life simply the symbols, then we may end up living a very hollowed experience. And I can speak from firsthand that, during the time that I practiced law, that I did have a lot of material things, but there were things that were hollow in my life. And we realized that, people have begged and betrayed and attacked and did all kinds of harmful things to get more material things, more money, more land, power over people, material resources. And that's why it is oftentimes said that the love of money is the root of all evil. Of course, it's not the money that's the problem, it's the love, the attachment. Because there's nothing wrong with money. We need a lot of money, I think, to transform our world. I always say I want everybody to be rich. But the money is there for us to appreciate, to celebrate, and to use it for a higher good. And if we don't have it, we'll definitely experience lack in our life, and things will not necessarily be comfortable for us. So you might want to ask the question, what area of your life appears to be lacking? Is it cash flow, where you feel you have more months, more days in the month, and you have money to cover it? Is there a lack of love or connection? I know a lot of people, they feel lonely even though they're in a crowded room. They may feel unappreciated or even invisible. Do they have a sense of a creative loss, particularly if they're creative people, but they're out of fresh ideas? Or if you're so busy that you don't have the time to spend for what's really important, whether it's your friends, whether it's your family, your loved ones, your hobbies, your purpose, whatever the case may be. Something may be holding you back from living or creating what is your best life now. But here's the thing, and what I've learned over time and what I'm continuing to learn, it does not have to be that way. Because we're designed for so much more in our life. I can look outside of my window today and I see really abundance is everywhere. I look at these trees in my neighborhood, and the trees never say I don't have enough leaves. They have more than enough. At night when you look up in the sky, there are more than enough stars to illuminate our way, to shine our way. So abundance really is synonymous with the nature of life. And I believe that we're here to reflect more of that abundance, not just get by, but have more than enough. And to get that, we must be based upon principle. We must know what the principle is, because this abundance is not just for the lucky. And when we understand where abundance comes from, we realize that we can live our life around it. And abundance is the result. And it's not limited to fame and fortune. It's not limited to just possessions. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. It's really about having a greater possession of ourselves. It's about a freedom. And we want to be free to be who we're here to be. The freedom to do what we're here to do. And the freedom to take care of whatever our loved ones may be around us, the people that care about us, so that we are being the best that we can be. So we must ask ourselves, what is the answer? How do we tap into this abundance? We've been conditioned to believe that the answer is to get more outside of ourselves. But as the late author and teacher Wayne Dyer noted, abundance is not something that we acquire. It's something that we tune ourselves into. And we may ask, what is he talking about? Well, if you ever tried to use one of those old radios in the car where you tried to dial to get the right radio station, that if you were not right on the right frequency, you would not be able to hear the station that you wanted to hear. And I think in our life, the right frequency is not trying to get more outside of ourselves, because that's not where the source of abundance is. If you look at an apple tree, I remember when I was a kid, we used to have these orchards in the neighborhood, these apple orchards. And we may think that as we look at those apples, that the apples are the source of abundance. But the source of abundance is not the apples. And the source is not even the tree. The source is not even the root of the tree. The source is really that invisible something that was created from the seed that really led to the tree that produced the apple. In other words, there's something that's invisible that led to the creation of the seed that led to the abundance that we see. And that's why all precious resources are not material. It's something that's invisible. When I was a kid, there was a scout instructor who used to tell us a story about a group of young men who were going through an initiation. And the head of the community would have them go out and look for and bring back what they consider the most precious commodity. And the first person went out, searched high and low, and came back with a handful of diamonds. And then people kind of applauded him for doing that. And this second person came back, and he had a handful of other precious metals and stones, I think rubies and so forth. And they said, "Great, good job." And the third person came back, and he had his fist balled up, and he opened up his hand, and there was nothing in there. And people were puzzled. But the head of the community who was sending the kids through this initiation applauded him because he said he really understood where abundance came from, what was most precious. And for them, the most precious things were ideas. Even though we cannot see them, they are more valuable to anything, and there is no limit to ideas. And so we must ask ourselves, how do we tap into this unlimited something that we call abundance in our own life? How can we bring it about in every area of our life? Well, the thing that I understand that we must do, and it's not original to me, is simply to practice something called the great reversal. Because like I said, most of us have been led to believe that abundance comes from acquiring. But everything that we see has come out of the invisible. So the great reversal is the realization that abundance comes from within out rather than outside in. And all our abundance is within us. All of our abundance is within us. So the question is, how can we become more abundant? How can we acquire more of that abundance? And the answer really is this: if we want more, whatever that more is in our life, we must be more. Because life flows from us and doesn't flow to us. And so what happens, this turns inside out the model that we've often been conditioned to believe on how life works. We live in an inside out world. And the world is nothing more than reflecting back to us what we are expressing in this world. So all the issues of our life emanate from our mind. We aren't in the world is in us. It's in our consciousness, it's in our awareness. So we don't have to play victim no matter what we're going through. Even if we're experiencing so-called bad things in our life or things in our life that we don't like at this moment, we don't blame ourselves, we don't blame other people, because there's no value in that at all. The benefit is that we use whatever experience that we have or going through to show us what we believe so that we can grow beyond that. So if we want more to come out of us, we have to let more life come out of us. So if we want inspiration, we have to show up inspired. We have to be inspired people. If we want more energy, we have to activate the energy within us. So in order to have more, we have to be more. And I remember I was working one summer in a furniture store, and I had the manager ask me to go up into kind of a very nondescript part of the store, almost like an attic, and look at all the old furnishings and kind of arrange them in a way that people could see what was there. And I didn't just, pull them off out of the closets and just line them up. I set it up so that I put on a whole display in the warehouse that made it look like it was like a pizzazzy type place. And as a result of that, he elevated me and gave me more money and more responsibility, not because I even, did anything special, but all I did was become more, make more out of what was there. And so I was able to generate an opportunity for me where there appeared to be none available. And I think we can do the same thing when it comes to abundance. We can generate our abundance. But here's the big challenge. We often block our own good. No one's really doing it to us. We're often doing it to ourselves. It's almost like, if you have a hose, and I don't know if you did this when you were a kid, you playing outside and you want to get some water, you drink out of the hose. I don't know if they do that anymore with all the other stuff going on with water, but that's a whole other conversation. But when I was a kid, we would get tired and thirsty, we'd drink directly out the hose, but sometimes the hose would be tied up in a knot and the water wouldn't be coming through. There's plenty of water there, but we were blocking it. And I think in our own life, we may have tied up our own hose and are blocking our good. So in order to have more than enough, we have to release the blockages, because it's the blockages that's stopping our abundance from showing up in our life. So what I want to do is talk about some of the myths that block us from our good, things that we believe in that are not true. And we want to shatter these myths so that we no longer are being held back. There's a book by Don Miguel Ruiz. He wrote a book called The Four Agreements. And Don Miguel tells us that we're living in a dream thinking that we're oftentimes awake. Because he lets us know that beyond our individual lives, that we've often been caught up in a belief system that everyone gets caught up in and they accept. And they're not conscious of it. There are beliefs about life based upon the environment that they may have grown in, the conversations they heard from their parents or people around them, that they've accepted without question. It creates a belief system that says what's possible, what's not possible, what works and what doesn't work. And after a while, we so take them in, they become our own stories, they become our own beliefs, and they lead to our own lack and limitation. But they're not true. They're myths and they're falsehoods, but we've accepted them as true. So the thing that I think we must do is shatter these myths from our minds if we're going to experience abundance in our life. And I've identified what I consider 5 that rise to the top. And I'll tell you that by no means are they all of them, but they're a good start. And we're going to identify these myths, these misconceptions about life, and also what are the truths that correspond to them that will help us have more than enough in every area of our life. And so the first myth is that we're separate from our good. And that somehow we must get our good in order to have it. We have to achieve outside of ourselves and pull it to us. But the truth is we are always one with our good. And we can't add or lose anything in our life. Now, as Don Miguel points out, in order for us to get to that point, in order to get to the point of not being separate from our good, we have to realize that we are one with everything around us, including our good. Now, there's sometimes when we believe in separation where it can be beneficial to us. If we're in the wild and there's a tiger after us, we want to keep that separate from us. But the greatest separation is our fundamental belief that our source, we call it God, is separate from who we are. And some people don't like the word God, but we can call it the force, or we call it that invisible something or intelligence that we talked about that is the source of the apple tree. But oftentimes we're dreaming that we're separate from the source, and that creates all of our suffering. So what we want to do is remove that blind spot to realize our oneness with our source. And I think in order to remove this blind spot, we first have to recognize that we're in it. We have to recognize that there's a belief that we're accepting that's not true. And one sign that helps us understand that is when we feel we're incomplete without something being in our life. We feel we're incomplete when someone or some condition is missing in our life, and only if we have it will we feel complete. But that is not true. We're always complete. And once we're aware of this blind spot, then this myth that is often unconscious can be dealt with, and we can start removing that myth and blocking that myth and shattering that myth. So myth number one is that we're separate from our good. We're never separate from our good. We're always one with it. The second myth is that material things are our wealth. As I mentioned this earlier, but it's critical because most people, they strive after what's really not important, because the material thing is not what they're looking for. What they're really looking for is an inner quality, the inner connection that they desire. What everyone is actually going for, I believe, is something called a state of being, a state of well-being. And that state of well-being may come in the form of peace or love or joy or freedom or fulfillment. And all of that is within us already. And so when we understand that all the outer things are nothing more than the fruit of the invisible principle, no matter how much, literally or figuratively, has been eaten away by the birds of life, no matter how much has been blown away by the winds, no matter how much has been dried up temporarily when we have these droughts in our life, we can always generate a new harvest. It's like the gentleman who at one time was very successful and had a lot of material good in his life. And he ended up losing it all, and he was dropped off in the middle of New York City with just $100. And within 6 months, he was well off again, better than he was even before. And what he said was he wasn't concerned about what he had lost on the outside, because he knew that if he got the right ideas, had the right belief, that he can once again rebuild his life and his wealth and his well-being once more. And I think once we can identify whether we're caught up in the myth that the material is the wealth, then we can do something about it by going to the invisible. How do we recognize this blind spot? Well, if we base it on our bank balance, if we base our well-being on our material possessions, if we base our well-being on what we can see, then we know that we're believing that wealth comes from the material world. And one of the ways that we can remove this blind spot is to practice meditation that gives us some awareness of what we're thinking and how we're seeing the world, beginning to affirm the better things that we want in our life, writing down the thoughts that come up, and even reading inspirational readings about people who have seemingly taken nothing and moved to something. And once we begin to practice these things, then we realize that it's not where we are right now that matters. And then we can become those candidates for real insight into where the ultimate nature of life comes from, where ultimate abundance comes from. So we realize it's not in the material, it's in the invisible. And this invisible something is infinite and is always within us. And then there's myth number 3, that we have to somehow believe in order to receive our good. But the truth is, what we have to do is ask. We have to ask. Sometimes we put our life on hold, thinking that we can't go for it until we believe in ourselves enough, till we believe in our goals enough, or we feel that we're good or we're worthy or confident that we can do it, or we're no longer afraid. And not to say that our feelings don't have a lot of power over us, but they don't determine what we can ask for most of the time, and they don't determine what we get. Often the thing that we have to do is simply act or ask, and this will begin to open up the channels and activate the inner feeling and generate what we need to have or what we want in our life. I mean, if you go back to Nike's, statement or saying that says, just do it. Because regardless how we feel at any moment, or whether we fully believe in ourselves right now, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes we just have to make action, take action, and move forward. And even if we don't have total belief in ourselves at the moment, if we move and ask and claim our good, good will show up. It's like the story of the guy who went to a doctor and the doctor prescribed some laxatives to him. I know it's a weird story. And the guy said, I don't believe in laxatives. And the doctor said, you don't have to believe in it. All you have to do is take it. Sometimes all we have to do is move forward in the direction of what we want in our life. And some of the signs that this blind spot that we have to believe has taken hold of ourselves is to look at times where we have a deep desire to do something. We want to say something. We want to create something. We want to contribute to something, but we're waiting to feel good enough. We're waiting to feel strong enough. We're waiting to feel talented enough or no longer feel scared or no longer feel unworthy. When we have that awareness, then you know that we've let that belief that we have to believe take us over. And then we can no longer be stopped by the fact we don't have that belief, and we just do, as Nike said, just do it. So we don't have to always believe. We have to ask and move in the direction of our belief. Now, the fourth myth is that sometimes we believe that we have to adapt to our circumstances. But the truth of the matter is what we must do is expand in face of limitation that may be around us. Because when we adapt, what we're doing, we're fitting in a condition. And there may be times that we needed to adapt, needed to fit in. If we had some bad weather, then we had to adapt by going to shelter. But the fact of the matter is, if we simply adapt to our circumstances, we're shrinking back and we're constricting the channels that can increase our possibilities of what we can become. If we want to activate this unlimited force that's within us, we must make ourselves bigger than the circumstances that we're facing. There was one teacher who said that when we're faced with limited circumstances, what we have to do is deal with it by having unlimited thinking, have unlimited ideas. And one of the practices that I've found very helpful when I feel I'm in a sense of limitation is to start writing down 10 ideas every single day before I start my day. If I want to have some sort of release from the limitation, I start visualizing and imagining ideas. We want to imagine ideas to be part of our life. So we don't want to adapt to circumstances. We want to expand our ideas in the face of limitation. And we know we're caught up in this myth of limitation, and we let external conditions determine, what we will do or what we don't do. But we want to realize this statement, that we're not here to adapt to our society. We're here to expand our society through the deliverance of the good that is here for us. We want to expand that. Okay. Let's go on. I think I have somebody that's unmuted, so let me deal with that right now. Now let's go on to the next myth. Myth number 5, that money or wealth is not spiritual. But the truth of the matter is that wealth is an attribute of spirit, attribute of truth, attribute of God, attribute of the source, whatever you want to call it. And I think this myth hurts many heart-centered people. As I noted earlier, there's an error thought that led to this was that, the love of money is the root of all evil, which is often misquoted. But money and all the things that it can buy, and all things really, are only symbols, as I mentioned, of true abundance. But it's not the abundance itself. Just like we said that the apples and the apple tree is not the abundance, but it's the invisible something that's behind it all. So that real meaning of that saying that money is the root of all evil, it means that we have fallen in love with the symbols. And we've got attached to the symbols that often leads to negative consequences. But once we know the supply, the source of our supply is spiritual, it's invisible, it's within us, we begin to lose our attachment to the outer symbols. And we begin to nurture the source. And this frees us up to enjoy the fruits and to savor them, to have that abundance without guilt, and to be able to share them freely. And I think even more importantly, what happens if the most creative, conscious, heart-centered people are able to rise to positions of prominence in our world, they'll have the resources to fund the visions, and these greater visions will help evolve the very planet in which we live. So we want to really look at wealth and money as being sacred. And now that we've identified some of these myths, we want to see what we can do to activate this flow of abundance. And this flow will give us everything that we want. It will take that knot out of that hose that we talked about earlier so that this flow can happen readily. And I call these gifts the gives, or the 7 gives. These are the things that activate the abundance within us. And the first gift or activator is to give out. Because the secret to, I think, to creating abundance in our life is represented by one word: giving. And we want to remember that everything, like I said, is within us and we can generate it. So if we want more of any quality to come into our life, we have to let more of that quality come out of us. And so when we master the forms of giving, we begin to crank up the production of our, what I call a divine power plant. And we generate a magnificent flow. So the first one is to give out. And this is about giving ourselves in whatever way we can. There may be forms of love or support or service, our abilities and talents. In a business, we would say that the business is giving value. Now, for our purposes, we want to focus on giving out in 3 areas: our time, our talent, and our treasure. And when it comes to time, sometimes we think that, I don't have enough time to start doing whatever it is that we want to start doing, that we think is important. But that's living from the outside in. And that's the opposite of how life works. If we have a desire right now, it is seeking to emerge in us right now, not in the future. So once again, it is now that we want to give it. The same is with our talent. We all have something to give. And if we don't know what those gifts are, we seek to discover them. We don't have to have them right away. We don't have to have them today. But we want to give something, whatever it may be, even if it's just a smile that we give to another person that helps make their day. And then finally, it's giving our treasure. Because all giving is simply about keeping the flow going. Because what we give out, we keep, and it comes back to us. Even though that's not why we give. That is the nature of the law of giving. That is the nature of the law of giving and receiving. So activator number 2 was giving, and number one is giving out. Now, activator number two is giving away. Now, this gift is really about letting go of things. Because I don't know about you, but oftentimes I become a pack rat. And I keep holding on to things that no longer serve me. But what happens when we hold on to stuff, we realize we're holding on to energy. We're stopping the flow of energy. We're moving. Everything is energy. And everything in our environment is an expression of that energy. So the things that we hold on to represent moments of our life story when we stop growing. And what that is stuck energy. So when we release these things that no longer serve us, what we're doing, we're playing the part of allowing us to move on to our next act in life. So when we give away, we free up stagnated energy so we can take on new and more empowered forms of our life for us. You know, there was a time that I was part of an organization we used to call Circulation Day, and everybody would gather up all the things that no longer needed, and they would just give them away to the outer community. And this would begin to free up the energy flow for them to attract more and more in their life. So the second activator for abundance is to give away. The third activator is to give up. Give up. You know, we talked about the outer clutter that we have, but this is about giving up the inner clutter in our life. We're talking about old habits, resentments, criticisms, judgments, complaints that are often stuck in our internal closets. You know, when we release our inner clutter, we have real growth. We have real healing. So it's about letting go of something and not adding anything to us if we really want to grow and have abundance in our life. Because once again, we want to remember we're already whole, we're already complete, that you already have what you need, but it may be limited by our mental or our emotional patterns that are not helping us anymore. And so when we release the inner clutter, again, we make space for the next stage of our potential to be expressed. And this allows us to be more so we can have that more in our life. You know, I had a friend who wrote a book called The Complaint-Free World. And part of his exercise was that we had to go 21 days without complaining. Because complaining is often an inner clutter that stops our good from coming forth. Now, understand that's no easy task. Because if you started complaining on the day 3, 4, or 5, then you had to start all over again to be in that not complaining state. But something would happen if you could go that whole 21 days. Your whole life would be transformed. You'd open up the new possibilities that you didn't even see there before. But as my friend said, be very, very careful when you get to that 20th day, because everything within our body will try to complain about something just before we get to the finish line. But if you want to really activate abundance, what we have to do is give up the inner habits that are stopping us from having that flow. The fourth activator is to give in. Now, this gift is more about surrendering our lesser attachment so that something that's trying to emerge can come through. I think to experience it about what's about to emerge, we have to let go of the lesser so the greater can take us over. In other words, we don't even want to hold on to the good that we have because it may be blocking the better. I often look at an acorn, for example. You know, an acorn really has the oak tree in itself. But in order for it to become the oak tree, you know, that acorn has to break up. But if the acorn was fully aware and it could talk, it might try to stay the same. It might try to call up a healer to repair its cracking shell. But we know if it does this, the most it can ever be is the best nut in the forest. It'll never fulfill its potential. And I think only when it surrenders to the oak self that is within it can it demonstrate its true abundance. And so for ourselves, we want to make sure that we're not holding on to the previous forms in our life that are blocking the greater good from coming into our life. In other words, like I said, we don't want the good to get in the way of the better. So sometimes we want to give in and let go of the lesser so the greater can happen. And then there's abundance activator number 5, which is to give thanks. Now, the gratitude of having thanks is the foundation of abundance. Because on so many words, what it is an affirmation that the gift has already been given, that we already have something to be grateful for even before we see it. And that's the truth, because it's already there. Everything that we see has already existed in the idea sphere. So we give thanks that it's already in our life. We give thanks that we already have it. We want to appreciate that which we don't even see now. Understand that when we appreciate something, it grows. Or as someone told me, what we appreciate, it becomes more in our life. It becomes more valuable. So this is not just a nice idea. It is a frequency that tunes us into the flow of the good and makes us a channel to have more good come to us. So even if we're going through a challenge, we want to give thanks. Not for the challenge, but for the gift that is in the challenge. And if gratitude becomes our habit, we will find the gift in that challenge. You know, as I mentioned, when I was going through my dark night of the soul in my life, in that I found a great gift that led me to some principles that changed my life forever. And if I had not gone through those things, I wouldn't have had the experiences and the opportunities that were availed to me as a result of going through those challenges. And then the 6th activator, give to yourself. I think this is one of the most overlooked elements of activating our inner abundance. To some people, this may seem to be selfish, but we want to look at it this way. And through this analogy, you know, if you ever flown an airplane, then you know that the airline attendant tells you that in the case of emergency to put on your mask first when the mask falls down. That we have to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first. Because we have to do that if we're going to be able to be of any help to anybody else. Because if we're not breathing, if we don't have the oxygen mask on, we can't help anybody around us. So when we give to ourselves, we're really talking about filling up ourselves before we give anything else out. Because if we don't practice this principle of giving to ourselves, it often leads to burnout, it leads to resentment, it leads to having less to give to others. I've come to the understanding that mastering this gift will allow us to be a stronger channel for giving more than ever before. And what it does, it helps us realize a level of true inner freedom. Remember, I keep going back to this, is already within us. And to get it, we have to give it. But we must first take care of ourselves. And I think to practice this abundance activator, we want to ask ourselves this question. If I love myself completely, how would I treat myself? We want to treat ourselves well. We want to pay ourselves first. We want to find the things that really give us enjoyment so that we can be the vessels to help others around us and attract even more abundance in our life. So to activate abundance, give to yourself, take care of yourself. Because as I say, you teach the rest of the world how to treat you by how you treat yourself. So treat yourself well and treat yourself with compassionate hands. And then the seventh abundant activator is to give forgiveness. The magic is in the word itself. Forgive. It's about giving and not getting. It's about extending ourselves and not withholding ourselves when it comes to forgiveness. You know, one teacher of mine said forgiveness is not a moral issue. It is an energy dynamic. And it simply means that we no longer hold on to the baggage of the past. Because there's a clear connection between forgiveness and the creation of lack and stagnation in our life. It helps to think about life as a pool of water. It has inlets and it has outlets. And when we're not willing to forgive, we block the outlets. When we aren't able to receive forgiveness, we block the inlets. It's like the result of having swamp-like conditions in which the energy is not flowing. You know, that's why they call the Dead Sea the Dead Sea. There's nothing flowing in and out. And few things can live in a swamp. And I know that sometimes it's hard to forgive because we feel we've been wronged by someone. But the important thing to understand about forgiveness is never for the other person. It's for us. It's always for the forgiver. You know, there's a gentleman who had a lot of resentment and unforgiveness toward his wife for over 10 years. You know, they had divorced, and over those 10 years, he still had those negative feelings toward her and resentment toward her. And only to find out that she had passed away 8 years before that time. So that unforgiveness didn't do anything to her, it did everything to him. Because unforgiveness is like drinking poison and thinking the other person is going to get sick. Not only do we get sick if we hold on to unforgiveness, but we stop the life flow. We stop abundance from taking place in our life. I think in many respects, giving is the new getting. And those 7 gifts of giving are the foundation for activating our own inner abundance. You know, it's a practical way to generate the energy of abundance in every area of our life, regardless of the conditions that we're going through. I think the big takeaway is that giving is the real secret of abundance. So we want to give first to ourselves so we can give to others. We want to live and we want to share. And then we'll see how abundance shows up in our life in all areas, not only materially, but emotionally, relationship wise, health wise. What we give out comes back. And I think greatness begins to show up in our life. Now, if you doubt that there's greatness within you, if you're somehow sabotaging your greatness, as I mentioned earlier, there's an opportunity to work with me in a group directly. And if you're interested in the opportunity, I'm going to be facilitating a workshop called Stop Doubting Your Greatness. And we're going to go in depth on some of these principles I talked about, and also leverage the power of being in a group, the power of what we call mastermind. And in this workshop, there are going to be practical tools to activate our uniqueness. We're going to be able to blast away stress. Stress is a big thing that holds us back from moving forward to really having great things happen in our life. We're going to incorporate those things that others do that make them successful and allow ourselves to use those tools so our greatness can shine. And if you're interested in being part of this, it's going to be taking place in Miami, Florida, at a place called the Sacred Space. And like I said, it's called Stop Doubting Your Greatness. It's going to be a live event. I will be there. A number of people that have been to my classes and workshops and seminars will be there as well. And you can simply go to this site, bit.ly bit.ly/sacred greatness. It's bit.ly/sacred greatness. And we're going to have a really great time because we learn a great deal when we go through this process. And I'll be bringing so many different tools to activate the abundance that is there for us, to activate the greatness that is within us, that is just screaming to get out, because we all have it within us. So if you're ready to change your life, I invite you to be part of this live seminar on June the 9th. It's going to take place between 9 and 4:30 p.m. at, like I said, the Sacred Space. And this seminar, we're going to uncover our unique visions. No matter what stage of life you happen to be in, whether you're changing jobs, whether you're getting a new job, whether you're moving into retirement, we're going to develop new paradigms to make whatever you want happen. And then we're going to talk about how we can also generate energy, because we can't really get anything done in our life if we're not energized. We have to fight off that fatigue, and we have to eliminate any unhealthy stress that we have. And we also have to know how to apply the techniques that other people have used to manage their days, accomplish more, and to deal with the setbacks that they may be experiencing. And then we want to be able to enliven our relationships, even immobilize movements that are so necessary to help transform our communities and our world, and to engage others in supporting your vision and where you're heading. So again, you can check out bit.ly, bit.ly sacred greatness is bit.ly sacred greatness. And we're going to be having a wonderful time. We're going to have some healthy food and some meditations and some tools that we'll walk away from, and we'll look at the world from an entirely different space. I want to thank you for taking out the time to attending this webinar today. And for those who are there at the beginning, I'll let you know that you're going to receive a special report from me in the next few days. And this report is going to give you some tools if you have a big decision to make in your life. It will help you navigate all the uncertainty so that when you have to make the decision between 3 different options, whether to take job A or job B, whether to move from A to B, whether to stay in a relationship or not stay in a relationship, it will walk you through a process so that at the end of the process, you'll have greater clarity of what you should do, and then your intuition will let you know what you will do. So I want to thank you for being part of this webinar with me today, and look forward to your special report. And again, if you can make it, you're in the area in South Florida on June the 9th, come to our Stop Doubting Your Greatness live event, and simply go to bit.ly/sacred greatness. Get all the information, and we look forward to seeing you there. And remember, you have the power to create your best life right here and right now. Have a great one.